Well, Your Excellencies, ministers, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you all for your attendance and enthusiastic participation. I look forward soon to open the fourth plenary session of the ISS Shangri-La Dialogue this year. But I would like first to thank very warmly President Halima Yacob and all the staff of the Astana for having so graciously hosted us last night for dinner at the Astana, and also the staff of the RSIS for having made the arrangements so wonderfully for us last night. We have a very full program again this morning with 6 full defense ministers speaking to us in 2 plenary sessions. And I'm very proud this morning that in our 4th plenary session, the first to kick off our Sunday morning proceedings on the theme New Dimensions of Terrorism and Counterterrorism, we have a representative from the Middle East, a representative from Asia, and a representative from Europe. So if there was ever a more elegant statement of the interdependence in today's world and the linkages between different geographies, the way in which our program this morning has been organized is a great testament to that. And I will ask each of the speakers to speak in the order in which they appear in our program, and then, as has become customary, we'll have 35 or 40 minutes of discussion and Q&A in order to engage in that dialogue for which this summit is so famous. And I'll introduce them first and then ask them each to speak. First, our good friend Dr. Khalid bin Mohammed Al Attiyah, who is the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of State for Defense of Qatar. He's attended a number of IISS events in the past. He has great experience as a human rights lawyer and also as a pilot of, I think, French aircraft, and has been in his position for a number of years. Major General Delfin Lorenzana is the Secretary of National Defense of the Philippines, and has been in the lead in that difficult and challenging struggle against ISIL in his own country, and particularly in Marawi. And our good friend also Dr. Ursula von der Leyen, Federal Minister of Defense of Germany, who has attended a number of IISS events as well, and with whom we engage on a regular basis. And I should say that I hope sometime in the near future that in addition to having IISS headquarters in London, an office in North America, an office in the Middle East, an office in Asia, that we hope we will have an office in continental Europe and in Berlin, and we are working steadily in that direction. I think our first step, to borrow the language of NATO, is that we will have a rotational presence in Berlin, having numerous events and people going there, and then hopefully establish ourselves on a permanent basis there. So 3 great friends of the IISS, 3 extraordinary representatives of their region, and with that preface, could I invite first Dr. Khalid bin Mohammed Al Attiyah to address the Shangri-La Dialogue. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Chapman, for the kind introduction. Honored guests, fellow Minister, Excellency, it is a truly pleasure and privilege to be here with you I have long been a fan of the IISS and thank the organization of this prestigious 3-day event for giving us here today a unique opportunity to come together to discuss issues that are relevant to us all. I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to the government of Singapore for their warm welcome and gracious hospitality. The Shangri-La Dialogue has emerged as a preeminent regional security forum, one that creates a solid platform where geostrategic security and defense policymakers from around the globe can converge to share ideas and exchange perspective on the greatest security challenges facing the Asian-Pacific region and beyond. I think Prime Minister Modi's keynote address truly set the stage for our discussion of the past 2 days by outlining the security challenges and opportunity that this region and the rest of the world face going forward. Speaking with my colleagues in the past about the Shangri-La Dialogue, many have shared what a great learning opportunity this forum has been for them. Having engaged in the dialogue myself, I am now privy to the wealth of idea and innovative solution to today's challenges that the participants and organization of the wonderful event have developed. I'm especially eager to engage in today's session surrounding the topics of terrorism and counterterrorism. The state of Qatar has been at the forefront of this battle for many years now, and we unfortunately have known firsthand the horror and panic that ensues in the aftermath of the terrorist attack. Often following such horrendous event, anger and fear takes charge. We seek to punish those who wronged, using a swift and forceful manner. We devise strategies that deal with the immediate aftermath of the attack, often overlooking vital preventive strategies that could have aid in circumventing such catastrophes. Terrorists and terrorist organizations are constantly evolving their tactics in an effort to spread fear and mayhem. They have devised strategies to move across borders, undetected, recruit the young and impressionable, and bypass monetary law to funnel money in an effort to serve their malicious action. The recent deadly attack in Liège is a heartbreaking example of the continued violence that pledges the security and safety of all of us. The cancer of terrorism, if left untreated, will continue to mutate and spread across the body, damaging every healthy cell in its way. My region, the Middle East, similar to the region, has been plagued by this malignant phenomena for decades, a phenomena that has resulted in eclipsing economic growth, strangling social and political progress, and deterring development policies in many areas of the world. We are confronted today with multiple manifestations of this evil. Our enemies no longer have a face, and we no longer know their names. They cower behind computer screens and hide in mountains and deserts, scheming to spread their hateful agenda and plotting their next violent act. As they evolve, we too must evolve. We must go beyond the spectacle to address the cause and drive of this evil. We must act now to not only fortify our borders, but our mind and the mind of our youth. We need to adopt policies of inclusion and economic reform to build better future for our children. A future filled with hope, hope of better life, of growth, and of peace and security. Qatar has joined its friends and allies in the global fight against terrorism, stemming from our conviction that terrorism, however it manifests and wherever it strikes, has a determined effect on all of us. We are all susceptible to this evil, and therefore we must all work in concert to eradicate its form of existence. Qatar has spared no effort in this fight against evil. We have dedicated our financial, technical, and logistical resources toward preventing violent extremism and cutting off terrorist funding. As a member of the United Nations, the State of Qatar has implemented all Security Council resolutions and penalties in regard to terrorist and terror financing. Our law and legislation have been constructed in a manner that allow us to constantly evolve and amend in an effort to remain ahead of any criminal or extremist activities. Qatar also remains an active member in the international coalition against ISIS, contributing greatly in the fight to dismantle and destroy ISIS. For decades, we have determined that the root cause of terrorists is this or that. We have unilaterally channeled our energy to tackle what we believe would be the core for this evil. However, through discussion such as the one we are having here and learning from recent events, we have come to the realization that there is no such thing as a singular root cause for this phenomenon. Numerous components contributed to the creation of an enemy. Feeling of alienation, economic disparities, social inequality, and political exclusion have all proven to be leading drivers in the recruitment of terrorists and the increase of terrorist attacks. That is why we have long urged the international community to address this concern multilaterally. Qatar has joined forces with countries such as Switzerland, the United States, the European Union, Japan, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and others to establish the Global Community Engagement and Resilience Fund, a fund dedicated to provide local community-level initiative focused on strengthening resilience against violent extremist agenda through cooperating with government, civil society, organization, and the private sector to support national strategies that aim to address the cause of violent extremism. The fund is currently active in countries such as Myanmar, Mali, and Bangladesh. Qatar, ladies and gentlemen, has taken the fight against extremists beyond the battlefield and into the classroom. Through organizations such as Education Above All and Educate a Child, we have been able to provide primary education to over 10 million out-of-school children across the world, empowering our young and equipping them with tools necessary to circumnavigate the often turbulent and unpredictable world will aid in preventing them from falling prey to extremist group and ideology. Further, Qatar Funds for Development has recently signed an MOU with the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, UNRWA, in the amount of $50 million dedicated toward the safeguard of the Palestinian refugee children, access to education in the West Bank, Gaza, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. As leader in the global fight against terrorism, we must work tirelessly to uphold and enforce the rule of law and maintain the value of human rights and the freedom that we all share. This core value unite us in the face of our enemies and ensures our victory over those who wish to derail and isolate us. The State of Qatar has proudly and firmly aligned itself with the principle of just peace, international cooperation, and human rights. We have rallied in support of disenfranchised and oppressed and have worked with our global partner in a cooperation with the United Nations agencies and civil society organizations to bring financial and humanitarian relief whenever it's needed. Nevertheless, a year ago, the State of Qatar and its people woke up to find themselves ambushed by being subject to an unjust, unlawful blockade. During the first day of our holiest month of Ramadan, we were suddenly We have suddenly been deprived of our food and medicine sources and left to find ourselves. This blatant violence to international law include the principle of non-interference and conflict settlement through peaceful means and the obligation to respect and to protection of a human right and preservation of a human dignity, as well as the Chicago Convention and the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, demonstrated the ruthlessness of policies taken against the state of Qatar. The blockading country continued to mobilize all means available to them. Politicians, poets, religious, clerks, actors, singers, and writers were all militarized in the attack against the state of Qatar. They did not stop there. The blockade country passed an observe preventing their own people from expressing any form of sympathy toward Qatar and defined penalties into a sentence of 3 to 5 years in prison and fines for up to $150,000. This obstruction were aimed to weaken our economy position and puncturing our social fabric. However, through the unwavering resilience of the Qatari people and the sound leadership of His Highness the Emir, we were able to weather the storm and emerge from it stronger than ever before. In the years since the blockade was imposed, our production of national product, including medicine and food, have grown exponentially. We have built on our bilateral relation and have explored the new and promising partnership to grow and develop toward our national vision of development and social prosperity. We are strongly today than where we were a year ago. And as we prepare to commemorate the 1-year anniversary of the blockade, a year of resilience and strength, a year of resolve and bravery, we must give thanks to those countries that have stood with us against this aggression and in favor of the rule of law and the principle of international law. Those identified the urgency of upholding the power of law over enforcing the law of power, as His Highness the Emir often says. Collectively, we are stronger by taking advantage of such opportunity where we come together and exchange intelligent information and experience. We can build a safer tomorrow for us all. Again, thank you all, and I look forward to fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Khalid, many thanks for those remarks, and I think particularly important at the start was your thought that there was no single root cause to the problem of terrorism, and that education was an important element in ensuring against that risk being inculcated, especially in the young. Before I move to the next speaker, I realized that I had failed to make my traditional housekeeping comment, which is that those of you who wish to ask questions or make comments need to tap your name badge on the left side of the microphone unit, press the touch screen either left or right, depending on where you're sitting, and then press the silver button. Your microphone will alight and you will be in the queue. Your microphone won't be on, only I can turn it on, but I've received a couple of text messages from people saying they would like to ask a question, but remember that you have to go through those 3 steps in order to be on my list. So thank you very much for doing that if you want to have the floor. And with that, could I please invite our good friend, Secretary Lorenzana, to address the dialogue. Thank you, sir.
Excellencies, fellow ministers, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am honored to attend for the first time the Shangri-La Dialogue and be with defense and security professionals from all over the Asia-Pacific region. I would like to thank the ISS, headed by Dr. John Chipman, for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share my perspective on terrorism and listen to others on various security concerns affecting our region. My thanks also goes to the Singapore government for the warm welcome and excellent accommodation. Terrorist organizations and the false narratives continue to threaten the global community. The attacks in Marawi last year and in Surabaya recently by Daesh-inspired groups reflect new dimensions of militancy and religious fundamentalism in Southeast Asia. This is most pronounced in the terrorist organizations' increasingly lethal and more ambitious tactical innovations, as well as shifts in their patterns of recruitment, which demonstrate their increasing operational sophistication. Allow me to expound on this disconcerting development based on the lessons that we learned from Marawi. First, what we are facing today is a new phase of full-fledged urban warfare led by Daesh-inspired groups. In the hopes of establishing a wilayat, or a governorate, in East Asia, we have turned attention to urban centers. The question that we have asked ourselves is, why Marawi? Why would Hapilon Isnilon, the designated emir in Southeast Asia, would move from the island of Basilan to Marawi? Two things. Marawi is the only Islamic city in the Philippines, and it is located in a predominantly Muslim province of Lanao del Sur. It was the intention of the terrorists to rally the city to their cause that will spread to the entire province of Lanao del Sur. The 5-month-long, it did not happen. They were not able to rally the Muslim population because the Muslim population fled the city. The 5-month-long siege highlights a tactical shift from guerrilla to built-up areas. In addition to funds from the Middle East, their financial support from the proceeds of illicit drug trade demonstrates the nexus between terrorism and transnational crime. The terrorists in Marawi tried to replicate what the Daesh did in Mosul and Raqqa. Urban warfare carries its own tactical advantages. Crowded urban spaces make it difficult for government forces to distinguish fighters from non-combatants, while allowing the terrorists to launch surprise attacks from different directions. Furthermore, waging war in cities increases the risk of large-scale civilian casualties and population displacement, hindering all-out offensive from government forces. Even when the civilians left Marawi, the cleaning operation was slow, costly, and tedious. Troops had to do it building to building, street to street, day in, day out. The total government casualties in the Marawi siege was 165 killed and more than 1,000 wounded soldiers and policemen. This did not include the civilians that were killed and also the terrorists. Second, we are witnessing new patterns of recruitment from Daesh-inspired organizations. The recruits in Southeast Asia are educated, young, and from middle-class backgrounds. Most recent attacks in Indonesia have also shown the advent of so-called family terrorists, where whole family, men, women, and children, are recruited to carry out attacks. Most disturbing is their willingness to conduct suicide bombing. This is a new development in Southeast Asian region and something that local terrorists has never done before. Many of the recent recruits were drawn to radicalism and militancy through exposure to digitally communicated terrorist ideologies. The Mauti brothers, who led the Marawi siege, were part of this new breed, young, charismatic, educated, and with extensive ties in the Middle East. In fact, some of them studied in the Middle East. They were also adept in social media to propagate and disseminate messages of hatred and violence, as well as proliferate and deepen anti-government sentiments among certain sections of the society. This leads me to my third point. The use of technology has increased the sophistication of terrorist operations. Cyberspace has now become a new battlefield between the forces of order and terror. The digital revolution, which enables instantaneous communication in a highly unregulated and borderless domain has given terrorist groups as well as lone actors a covert, efficient, and practically cost-free means to reach a wider audience. DICE and its affiliates are known to exploit multimedia and short messaging services and social media platforms to choreograph operations and promote their narratives. We suspect that as we improve our cybersecurity operations, local terrorists have been forced to migrate to the darknet to conduct their business. Furthermore, the terrorist financing is aided by the growing use of digital currencies and mobile payment transactions, which offer a high degree of anonymity with minimal regulatory oversight. We estimate that at least $1.5 million was sent by DICE to finance the Marawi attack through electronic transfer. Advancements in equipment and weaponry have likewise enabled militants to launch assaults in a substantial scale. In Marawi, militants use radio frequency scanners and unmanned aerial vehicles for surveillance and advanced firearms, including heavy and light rifles, rocket-propelled grenades, and sniper rifles with thermal imaging scopes. They also manufactured and use large amounts of improvised explosive devices. We recognize that the challenges do not end when the military declares victory. Thanks to the sacrifice of our brave soldiers and the timely assistance from our neighbors and allies, the DICE-affiliated groups have failed to establish a foothold in southern Philippines. Yet, their initial accomplishment in Marawi provide a viable blueprint for terrorists across the region. As I speak, remnants of the Maoti group who managed to escape from Marawi are seeking new recruits. To win the war against extremism, we must develop capabilities against the increasing lethality available to terrorist groups and the tactical advantages offered in urban setting. We need to establish a rapidly deployable combined military force, a quick response team that is trained and properly equipped in 21st century urban warfare. Special forces with hostage rescue capabilities will enable us to save more lives. We should endeavor to reach international agreements that regulate cyberspace and affirm that the rule of law applies online as well as offline. Aside from cooperation among our governments, we should also encourage collaboration with and support from the private sector to filter, detect, and remove contents that incite terrorist acts and deal with the challenge of encrypted services in pursuit of public safety. We must continue to engage and cooperate with each other on an institutionalized basis. Regional platforms such as the EDMM and EDMM Plus, the ASEAN Regional Forum, the East Asia Summit, provide venues to share experiences on and enhance understanding of the terror threats that we all face. Meanwhile, other sub-regional efforts such as the trilateral cooperative arrangement of the Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia, the Our Eyes initiative led by Indonesia, and sub-regional defense ministers meeting on counter-terrorism convened by Australia enable direct stakeholders to address immediate security concerns. Aside from regional and international cooperation, allow me to emphasize the importance of a multi-sectoral approach within one's country. The Marawi siege exposed the presence of radicalized Muslims, young and old, which could be attributed to the influx of hardline, ultra-conservative Islamic preachers or missionaries that goes back as far as the 1980s. Many Muslim families who were able to obtain funds established their madrasas or Islamic schools in their homes with little supervision from the Department of Education. Some of these schools were operated by those with extremist Islamic beliefs. Recognizing the important role of the madrasas, the Philippine government has sought to develop and institutionalize the madrasa system by formulating a standard curriculum for public schools and privately run madrasas, an initiative that was initiated in 2004 but being implemented only in full recently. We also need vigilant law enforcement agencies. For instance, our Bureau of Immigration is monitoring visiting clerics that comes from countries with history of ultra-conservatism. We likewise need to amend our existing counterterrorism laws to enhance the effectiveness of security and enforcement agencies. Aside from cooperation with education and law enforcement sectors, we need a whole-of-nation approach to implement de-radicalization programs by involving Muslim religious and traditional leaders, local elected officials, and other stakeholders. We have likewise drawn lessons and best practices and experiences from our neighbors, namely Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei Darussalam. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to end my remarks by stating that there is no guaranteed formula to suppress and end the scourge of terrorism. Despite all our best efforts, it will be with us for some time to come. But if we continue to closely collaborate and cooperate, we will eventually eradicate it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Defense Minister, and in particular also for reminding us the increasing sophistication that some of the terrorists operating in this region have attained, UAVs and the like. And I think that is one of the challenges that face those groups that are trying to, those countries rather, that are trying to meet this challenge. Could I now ask the German Defense Minister, Ursula von der Leyen, to address us and give us her perspectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, Excellencies, fellow ministers. It's good to be back in Shangri-La Dialogue. Here we can directly see and feel the extraordinary dynamics of the Asian world, dynamics that encompass economy and society, science and innovation, and also international security policy. They are the dynamics of opportunities and modernity, and at the same time, the dynamics of risks and threats. In Europe, the situation is similar. I was last here in 2015, 3 years ago. At the time, in Europe, neither Brexit referendum had happened, nor had we experienced the refugee crisis or heard the many new voices that favor unilateralism over multilateralism. The brutish force of ISIL terror had not reached the hearts of our cities, nor was there the utmost urge that we, Europe, do more for our own security at last. Only 3 years on, the Europe that I left to speak to you today is no longer the same. Within the European Union, we had to reassure ourselves of who we are. We have come out stronger. We have spoken more honestly about solidarity and our values than in decades. We stand united in promoting free trade and opposing protectionism. We're fighting together for global agreement on climate change. We are reinforcing the common protection of our external borders, and we have understood that we need to take more ownership for security on our continent in our own interest. Europe, which for a long time has been perceived as a purely economic and trade power, now has started what it takes to become a truly relevant partner in security and defense. We have started the European Defense Union, a strong, comprehensive European pillar within our transatlantic alliance. The European Defense Union will enable better common planning for armed forces, smarter common investment in capabilities, and faster and better coordinated military action. We have already begun to fill the European Defence Union with life. My government's ultimate goal is to have an army of Europeans. While countries will continue to have national armed forces, those will be fully interoperable and compatible with each other. And there is a reason for all this. We know that we, as European nation states, in the long term, will only remain truly relevant if we join forces. The geopolitical shifts and the demographic realities in Europe speak a very clear language. Only if we join forces will Europe become a more relevant global partner, a more relevant partner also for our friends here in Asia. We had to take these steps, not least because our security situation has changed dramatically in recent years. Our big neighbor, Russia, is increasingly projecting power with military means. Most recently, Ukraine was the victim of this. What Russia puts into question is one of the very fundamental principles, the rules-based order, rules to be respected by all countries, be they big or small. This principle we will by no means abandon. At the same time, we are faced with an arc of crisis stretching from West and North Africa to the Near and Middle East, with unstable and fragile states, civil wars, genocide, displacement, misery and hardship, and with brutal terrorism that combines archaic objectives and state-of-the-art methodologies. How to deal with all this? There are 5 thoughts I would like to share with you. First, there is truth in the saying, it takes a network to fight a network. Translated into concrete terms, this means we must intensely coordinate our national instruments of law enforcement, diplomacy, economy, development policy, and the military, and then apply a well-tailored and targeted mix of measures. Internationally, we need to cooperate even closer in our respective regional organizations and alliances. In other words, terrorism that uses diverse hybrid means requires a hybrid response, a hybrid defense. In some places, we are doing this already. For example, within the coalition against terror to defeat ISIL. We fight with military means, yet reconstruction and stabilization are part of our planning right from the start. It is exactly these military and humanitarian efforts that we need if we want to avoid hopelessness and despair turning into radicalization and violence. When poverty grows radicalization, it's human security, education, and jobs which foster reconciliation, stability, and peace. Second, we have to win the battle for attention. ISIL's recruitment strategies are advanced and highly professional. 90% of its propaganda is distributed through visual content. It appeals to the emotional level by using imagery and music, which skillfully replicate the aesthetics of popular video games. We have to be smart in our response. We need to develop our own narrative and communicate the openness of our societies, our respect for other cultural, religious, and national traditions in a powerful and modern way. At the same time, we need to address, expose, and disprove the false arguments of terrorist organizations and be convincing, particularly to young people. Third point, we have to strengthen fragile countries and regions that are vulnerable to terrorism, help them build resilience. This means that we need to enable and empower them to assume responsibility for their own security. The fight against terror needs a local face. We are making a tangible contribution to this with a number of projects, for example, in Jordan, in Tunisia, or for example, in Iraq, or by supporting the G5 Sahel Force Conjointe in West Africa. Fourth point, terror needs money and communication. This is why we have to disrupt the terrorist channels of communication and financing. We're working hard on this already, especially in the Global Coalition Against ISIL. We formed working groups to coordinate our strategic communication and counter-financing. We have to take concerted action to combat black market operations, the cashing in of hostage-taking, and art theft even more effectively. Fifth and last point, the return of fighters harbors an enormous risk. Those individuals are combat-proofed, radicalized, often traumatized and brutal, and they are mobile. This is why we in Germany have taken numerous measures to prevent departures to join ISIL, to prosecute foreign fighters, and to invest in prevention and de-radicalization. For us, this topic is one of the very top security challenges. It needs highest attention and a continued unified effort across the continents. Finally, one principle holds with regard to all actions in the fight against transnational terrorism. The rule of law and our values must be respected, because human rights and the rule of law apply even to the worst criminals. At the end of the day, we will only succeed if we steadfastly defend this fundamental of principles. The power of law must prevail over the law of power. My country stands for this principle, and so does Europe. This principle is at the root of our firm conviction that we can best protect our security through reliable and rules-based multilateral cooperation. Thank you for having me here.